Okay, 4 minutes past that by my clock, so we'll crack on. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Tudor Price. I am the Deputy Chief Exec at the Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and I also run the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, and I'm going to be your chair for the next hour whilst we negotiate the tricky issue of import and export of food and animal products in particular. We are delighted. We have a fantastic array of expertise around the table with us today, and they'll introduce themselves very shortly. But there is very much an opportunity for Q&A here. So if you haven't had a chance to submit a question beforehand, you are more than welcome to use the chat facility on the right-hand side here. I will be keeping an eye on that. Put the questions in there. If for any reason I don't understand what on earth it is you're asking, I may ask you to unmute and actually come online and actually ask the question yourself. But this is really a chance for you to sort of tap into the expertise. The situations are very unique and very specific. Okay, so we understand that. So please do feel free to be specific and ask about your case in particular. We have some questions that have already been submitted, so we'll use those to start off with, but I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. As you can probably see, this session is going to be recorded. And once we have done a little bit of editing and some subtitles, it will be posted onto the Trading Standards website, where it'll be available for continued use and viewing. Right. You will also see in the chat a few links being posted already, and there will continue to be some information and links posted there. Again, feel free to sort of have a look through. They'll be referenced by our guest speakers this afternoon as we go forward. So without further ado, let me push on and invite our panelists to introduce themselves, their expertise. We'll start with those that I know first. Nathan, over to you, sir.
Hello, Tudor. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me along. My name is Nathan Martin. I'm the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Food and Commercial Services at Kent County Council. I've moved away from the enforcement side of things, and I now work in the Business Advice Services team. So working purely with businesses, trying to help you get things right, giving you the advice you need, not only to be compliant, but to prevent you making mistakes that are going to cost you money in the long term. So I'm very much all about getting business moving, getting business profitable, and compliance at the same time. I'll be answering questions on sort of the labelling, the composition side of things, if you have a think about that.
Fantastic, Nathan. Thank you very much. Nathan and I have done many of these before, and I can tell you now he's been brilliant in terms of navigating the sea of changes that are out there at the moment. Graham, I'm going to come across to you next. Graham, very good afternoon and warm welcome.
Hello, Tudor. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm the International Trade Advisor with the Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and also currently being retained by the Kent and Medway Growth Hub. For me, I'm here as a generalist. It's my area of specialism is about moving cargo, getting the documents right so that you can get paid, or organising the procedures so that you can bring goods in. I can't claim to be a food expert, but I'm a bit useful with logistics itself, so I've been brought along for that particular background.
Superb, Graham. Thank you very much indeed. Where are we going next? Michaela. Michaela, good afternoon and welcome.
Hi, and thank you. I will turn my camera off for most of this, primarily due to a poor internet connection. So do let me know if I break up. I'm Michaela, and I'm from DEFRA, and I work on the phased-in implementation of controls for animal products EU to GB. So that's food and drink that contains animal products and animal byproducts not for human consumption. And particular area of expertise would be composite products, which contain a mixture of animal products.
Superb. Michaela.
And plant products, rules that are being introduced.
Michaela, thank you very much indeed. Yes, unfortunately, your internet connection is living up to the billing, but thank you very much. We can hear you clearly, even though we can't see you, so thank you so much indeed. And finally, last but not least, Tony. A very good afternoon to you, Tony.
Thank you, Tudor. Yeah, I'm Tony Baldock. I'm the head of Port Health at Ashford. We've just set up a very new Port Health service here. So we will be manning the border control post and supplying the staff there. So we will be the people that you kind of see at the sharp end if you're bringing goods through the tunnel. So our team will be dealing with products of animal origin and products of animal origin not for human consumption, and high-risk foods and things like cookware from China. So that will arrive with us, and you'll be dealing with us there. We're really there to help and not hinder you, and coach you, not catch you. That's the whole kind of premise of what we're trying to do there. Obviously, we're navigating the changes, but that really is the whole ethos of the service. We're standing up for you. So please ask any questions that would be of help today.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. And you're absolutely right. I think it's probably good to mention that really. The expertise here is none of us want to catch anybody out, really. We're, obviously the wrongdoers and the ne'er-do-wells will always be pursued and hounded down. But ultimately, you guys are here because you have particular questions, you want to be doing the right thing, and we really want to help you achieve that. So if for whatever reason you can't get the answer you're looking for today, or you have further questions, then please do get in contact. We have a couple of services that will pick up this afternoon. One here is the Growth Hub helpline. This is a free helpline provided by us at the Growth Hub. We will take details and put you in touch with the relevant experts if need to be on a callback basis. You can give us a call on 03333 602 300 Monday through Friday, and the guys will be able to sort of put you in touch with either through Tony, Nathan, Michaela, Graham, any other sort of supporters that are out there, or maybe some other expertise. Do feel free to give us a call and book a call back from one of the experts. Right, let's get on to the meat and bones of why we're here. Okay, so we're going to have some questions which have already been submitted. Again, just to reiterate for those of you just joined us, if you have specific questions, please do enter them into the chat area, and I'll make sure that they get moved up. So let's start with one for everybody, really. So at the moment, of course, no goods are being checked from the EU. Stuff coming in, just sales on by. But of course, that's about to change. What's it going to look like? Does anyone have any ideas as to whether it's going to be really expensive? Is it going to have queues the other side of the water? How is this going to play out? Who wants to go first on that?
Do you want me to pick that up first,
Tony, go on. And this is your reason to exist, isn't it?
It is. That's our kind of remit, really. So you're quite right that there aren't checks being undertaken as stuff is flowing this way. There are still checks going the other way when you're going into Europe, so that's a bit unfair, but that's another story, isn't it, really? It's not true to say there are no checks going on. So some products are being checked. So things around illegal, unregulated and unregistered fishing, that's already in place, and that's starting. It's low risk because it's European kind of freight that's coming, so but the regime still applies. From January we will be starting to do proper checks, so the checking will begin in earnest in October, but in a test phase. So the first part of the process will be to do documentary checks. So we have bought an online facility called Phyllis. So anybody that's importing through the tunnel, you can use that, and that's a document management system. As long as you get your documents in there, we will be able to help you. That also makes it easy for you to pay. The other kind of system that will come online is a thing called IPAFs, which is import of animal food and feedstuffs. So you'll use that as a system. If anybody's got experience already, it would be the equivalent of traces that would be used in the old-fashioned kind of days. So yes, that's what will happen, and we will be checking goods at the Sevington. The thing is to remember that not all goods are checked, and they're not all subject to physical checks. It's important to remember that. So the freight will flow freely, hopefully still. Certain goods will be checked for physical, so there will be samples taken from them, but the bulk of stuff will be checked for documentary checks. So it's really important that if you need an environmental an export health certificate, you have one, that you have the commercial documents such as the packing list, etc., and that will help us to help you there. So that's due to start 1st of January, that the checks are starting properly. So that's when we're kind of aligned with partners across the water there. But from October to January, we will be practicing. So hopefully in that kind of time frame, we can get the system right for you and us. So
my question then off that is, who's responsible for entering that information onto those software programs, and how does that, is it going to be training or provision as far as you're aware?
Yep. So the person really, it could be a few, to be honest, Tudor. So most people would use a cargo agent if there's kind of customs things to clear, because cargo that with HMRC is quite tricky, some of those things. So but anybody can enter them up onto Phyllis. Phyllis is quite easy in IPAFs, but a lot of the trade, certainly from my background, is very much Gatwick Airport. It would be cargo agents that would help to get the commodity codes right. But it would be the person who's kind of either, it could be the importer or the even the exporter sometimes, and the cargo agent. So that's kind of on the web, the IPAF service. It's not up and live yet, but that's the person that would load it on there basically, and the documents could be submitted in digital form. That's a kind of system being built by government at the moment. I'm confident it will be there. It just replaces the European equivalent that was out there before called Traces. So
okay.
did I answer the whole question?
There's a number of agents out there touting for work to do that for you.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Who's liable though? Who does liability sit with eventually?
It really would be probably the owner of the goods when they arrive here. So it was always a bit difficult, because sometimes in that kind of imports and exports world, it's really the person exporting that would be looking at to kind of test their product. But the person normally that it would be the owner of the goods, so the importer. But a lot of the times, as they're imported and they're going off to another party, like to a third party. So it isn't as simple as just saying it's that person responsible. The person making the declaration on IPAFs would be the person we would be dealing with and chasing. So it's, a lot of times that would be an agent on behalf of the owner of the goods. I confess I've seen IPAFs in its very early iteration, but I suspect it's very much like Traces. I've got very much a lot of experience, and it would be very similar. There'll be boxes for both of those, I think.
Okay, that's good. I think that it always fills people with dread when you think filling in boxes on computers, and people start to get anxious about whether or not there's going to be support. But I hope that there's going to be plenty of support on offer.
We'll do that, Tudor. We will be helping. I mean, obviously
Fantastic.
we can't enter stuff for people, but we are reaching out. We're always reaching out with the IUU checks at the moment. But as I say, that helps genuine. I know DEFRA have done a lot of work with cargo agents too. But any help we can give, we certainly will give.
We've got Phyllis and IPAF, so those are the two names we've got to look out for.
Yes, and there's another system called Destinate. So she's got a kind of a husband, Phyllis, Des. So Destinate, Phyllis, and
Phyllis and
IPAFs.
I love it. Brilliant. Okay, that's going to be fantastic. Super. Thank you very much indeed, Tony. Graham, I'm just going to come to you because there's a question on here about Inco Terms, and I know certainly through our experiences so far, Inco Terms obviously play a big part in who does what and how things are going to happen. Could you sort of maybe just do a quick reminder of why they're important, and whether there's anything that we need to be aware of in the next sort of few months as things change?
Yeah, thank you, Tudor. Interesting to listen to Tony and what Tony's saying about who owns the goods, because what Inco Terms do is they let us know when ownership of the goods changes, where the goods move from the sender and their ownership to the recipient and their ownership. I think the important, there are 11 Inco Terms, and I'm not going to bore you by going through all 11. They gradually stage through from the first one, which essentially is Ex Works, through the final one, which is the duty paid. I'm just going to single out 3 that are worthy of mention. And whether and this refers to whether you are the sender of the goods or the recipient of the goods, shipper or consignee, whatever you want to call yourselves. And it's interestingly, actually, I had a conversation with an exporter I was with this morning, and we particularly majored on one area, and it's something that a lot of people get caught out on. And I love the comment that Tony just made. We're about coaching rather than catching, I think it was you said. So I think I might borrow that one myself if that's okay with you. The Ex Works Inco Terms, which is the starting point, that's essentially where you say to your customer, we've got the goods, we'll make them available at our loading bay, and you can come get them. You may have to book yourself in, but you come and get the goods. That is the easy peasy sale where you're not really doing much to help the customer, but quite a number of companies like to do that. One of the reasons they like to do that is because they don't have to get involved in the export customs entry or customs clearance, because the buyer becomes responsible for clearing the goods through export. Having said that, the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, in their infinite wisdom, have said you should be prepared as the exporter to help the customer with their export clearance if they ask for assistance, but it is the customer's problem, if you like, or challenge. The bit that we were majoring on in the conversation this morning and is very worthy of mention is it's okay saying, well, there we are, the goods have gone, I don't have to think about them anymore, but be aware, and I know we're dealing with food, so maybe we're dealing sometimes with a VAT situation and sometimes not, but let's work on the basis for the moment that there may be some VAT on the type of product you're sending. If the VAT isn't charged because it's an export, that's fair enough. Exports are zero rated for VAT in a B2B environment. But if you can't prove export, the VAT people may come after you and say, well, we've got nothing that shows that this is exported. How do we know that it's exported? We want our 20%.
Yeah.
And so it's important that the exporter agrees with the importer some way of getting access to a proof of export. The essential document that is proof of export is the export customs entry document, the export declaration. It may be possible to work with bill of lading, certificate of shipment, airway bill, that sort of thing, but do, as an exporter, have a way of making sure that you record the information that shows that the goods have been exported. At the other end of the scale, the ultimate delivery term is delivered duty paid. That actually means that the exporter becomes the importer of record in the destination country, and many companies that may have done that sort of thing before are now shying away from it because they wish to avoid being accountable for VAT and duty in the country of destination. So typically the delivery terms being used are being switched from delivered duty paid to typically delivered at place, which essentially is a named place, the address of the buyer or their depot or their freight forwarder or whatever has been agreed, maybe a third-party logistics company or something like that. And then the DAP delivery term means that as an exporter, you don't have to get involved in anything to do with customs clearance, apart from assisting again. Turn that around the other way, and it applies in imports to the UK as well as exports from the UK. And those are the key comments I would make. But to put it into some context, Inco Terms is a course that the Chamber asked me to run from time to time, and it's a good half day to go through it in some detail. So it can be quite an involved subject, but I'm happy to help.
Absolutely.
Make some explanations.
And again, just for those of you that sort of want to sort of ask specifics, again, you can book some time with Graham to do a call back, 03333 602 300. Graham, thank you very much indeed. Interesting, there's a question we've had in, do self-employed have to do the same custom declarations to import food as large companies? I'm presuming from what Tony said and Graham, what you said earlier, that absolutely it's whoever is the importer, whether they're self-employed, whether they're a large limited company or otherwise. Is that correct, Tony? I'm going to come to you first on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be no kind of differentiation there. Absolutely, okay. The same rules that would apply.
So, and I think that's interesting. We've had a couple of queries at the Growth Hub recently where businesses or individuals have ordered stuff, but of course, you know, they are still the importer regardless of the sort of state of play. Okay.
There are personal kind of import that you can do, Tudor, so not to confuse the two. So you can bring back some personal imports, but that's very different, and you can bring in trade samples, but they're limited in volume. So if you're actually buying stuff abroad to bring in to sell here, then yeah, the same regime would apply. The shorthand you'll hear is OCR, which are official control regime. So that's what you hear about the checks, and they're still aligned with the European ones at the moment. But yeah, it would make no difference in terms of company status. That the tricky bit is, as Graham was talking about, custom status and ownership, etc., and that's why customs agents are often used in this kind of world of imports.
Excellent, that's really, really helpful to know. Okay, authorized representative, AR. Nathan, I'm going to come to you on this. First of all, there's a question here. If I have an EU AR, does that mean I can use mutual recognition? And can an AR be a family member? So do you want to, for those that don't know, just explain what the AR is and how that plays out?
Yeah, I'm going to have to explain a couple of these terms.
Yeah.
So authorized representative is basically somebody you enter into a formal agreement with, and they agree to take responsibility for your goods. A lot of UK businesses will require an authorized representative now, because if they're sending their food out to Europe, Europe require that the name and address that appears on that product has to be a business that is established within the European Union, because they need a food business in the EU who is responsible for it, who will make sure that if there's a problem, it gets recalled, and if any action has to be taken, it's them, that it's taken against. Now, because a lot of UK businesses aren't established in the EU, they need to find somebody who can be responsible for that, and that's what the authorised representative does. So it's an agreement with them where they agree that you stick their name and address details on your food, and then if there is a problem, they're responsible for sorting it out. So there was two things. It was mutual recognition, wasn't it? Okay, now, again, it's another term that I need to briefly explain. Now, there's two types of laws. There's member country laws, which only affect that member state and goods being sold in that member state. And then we have harmonized laws, which effectively are the same rules applied all the way across the EU. And that is how everybody who doesn't work within trading standards and similar thinks of harmonized laws. What people don't realize is that there's lots of tiny little differences in all of those harmonized laws in each member state, because we amend it so that it's a bit better for our particular way of working. So even though they're supposed to be the same, they're not all the same. And then, of course, sitting under that is all those laws that apply in each member state. While we were a member of the Union, there was a nice little thing called mutual recognition. And it said that if your goods would not comply with the law, either the changes to the harmonized law or the local laws in that member state, it didn't matter as long as you could sell them legally in your member state. So it didn't matter, they didn't comply with the law. They would become legal. When we dropped out of the EU, we lost mutual recognition. So now we think it's legal, but when we get over there, it turns out there's minor changes that we haven't taken account for. We haven't got mutual recognition anymore, so those goods are no longer legal. So to come back to the question, if you have an EU authorized representative, no. Unfortunately, that doesn't put you under the magical umbrella of mutual recognition. They would have to effectively change hands. So if you were selling them to a European business, so rather than just having their name on it, they actually became their goods, provided they could legally market them in that country where they are based, then they can sell it all across the EU. And it doesn't matter whether it complies with the other countries, because it complied in their country. But unless ownership is changing hands, then no, you are still a UK business. It is not a product of the EU. And unfortunately, you need to effectively comply with the individual laws in each country where you're going to sell those products. And that can be quite a difficult prospect. And then the second part of that, can an authorized representative be a family member? Yes, that's perfectly fine. Doesn't matter what the relationship is, providing you have a written contract with them saying that they will be responsible for your products and that they are capable of taking responsibility for them. So do anything that is required to make it legally compliant and all that sort of thing.
You say responsible, to what extent are they responsible? I mean, is the authorised representative liable in some respect?
Yes, absolutely liable. So this is one of the reasons it has to be such a formal agreement, because by taking responsibility for your goods, if something goes terribly wrong, say the worst case scenario happens, somebody died of an allergen complaint, something like that, and the EU authorities want to take action against somebody, they will be taking it against the authorised representative, because as a UK business, you're not bound by the EU laws. They can't take that action against you. They have to take it against the EU-based business.
Okay.
So if you did have a family member doing it, that's all very well, but you obviously could be opening a family member up to significant liability.
So definitely choose one you don't like very much, otherwise there's going to be problems. Okay.
Second cousin or something.
Just on that, you mentioned labelling as well. Which language should you choose for the labelling? I mean, obviously, if you're going to be selling it all over the place.
Well, fortunately, most countries are quite simple. They have an official language. There are countries like Belgium where they speak 3 different languages, but normally you use the official language. If not, you would drop back on the one that is most comprehensively spoken in that country. To take Belgium as an example, they speak French, Dutch, and Flemish, I believe.
Yep.
The Flemish speaking part of it is a very, very tiny part, so you wouldn't choose to label your product in Flemish because that's not going to be considered the official language of the country. What I would say is it will depend on where you are selling the product as well, because if I land a product in France, but it's not being placed on the market until it gets to Germany, it's never going to be sold in France. If I label it in French rather than in German, then it's not legal once it gets to Germany. So it's the country where it's being placed on the market is the country that it has to be labeled in.
So if you're selling in Spain and France and Germany,
Yep.
we're saying three languages?
Yep, Spanish, French, and German. It would need to be legal in each of those member states.
That's going to be,
like I say,
okay.
The ones where you're just transiting through, though, because you might transit through 5 countries and never have intention to sell it there, that doesn't need to be on the label.
Just going back to the AR, Tony, before I come to that, just one quickly. The AR side of things, presumably then a limited company would be a good idea in order to sort of protect their sort of liability.
Well, my advice would always be to comply with the law. But yes, a limited company does limit personal liability. But of course, in all these pieces of legislation, if a director or a company officer is found to be personally liable, so negligence, connivance, anything like that, then of course they can be personally liable. And
in terms of obviously a limited company, it's going to have to be a GmbH or whatever equivalent is in that particular country that they're being established.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics on that, but you would need, I believe you would, well, I know you would need to be registered within the EU and likely within that country, but I don't know how you would go about doing that.
Well, this is why I know the Dutch Chambers of Commerce have been very quick off the mark to try and offer their services as AR. Tony, sorry, you wanted to add something there, Tony?
No, just very quickly, Judah, I believe that there's been a missive to say that export health certificates are only getting provided in English now. So historically, you'd get a export health certificate that was in 2 languages. So everything that came from Mexico in the good old world to Gatwick would be in Spanish and English version. But I'm pretty sure that there was something from government recently saying that anything going to the EU will only be supplied in English, only one. So I'm pretty sure of that. So that may be good for people. And I suppose it's because English is such a major language.
We also had a bit of a row kicking off with whether or not there had to be GB or UK on certain certificates of origin and stuff, which was, but I'm sure this is all part of the smoothing out of the arrangements between us and them. So that's a positive. Thank you, Tony. Okay.
If I could just clarify, my comments weren't in relation to sort of export health certificates, anything like that, because I have no knowledge of it. It was just in relation to the product and the documentation in relation to the product, so the name, ingredients, all that sort of thing.
Food labeling. Now, which sort of, whilst we're talking about sort of ARs and sort of being based in Europe, so in order to sort of be established in the EU, does that mean you've got to have your whole operation there? Is that the sort of story? And then, of course, I'm going to bring in the Northern Ireland question as well. If you've got a name address in Northern Ireland, does that count as EU?
Okay. What it boils down to is no, you don't have to have your entire operation based in the EU. What we've been advising people for years is that established in the Union means that a business or part of the business is actively trading from and has an element of their operation in one of the 27 member states of the EU. So recently, I think back in December, DEFRA did give us an opinion. What they basically said is the things you need to consider are where business decisions made, where's infrastructure located, where's the central administration taking place for the business. And if you want to be established in the Union, the name and address that you put on that product, it has to be a food business operator. It has to be capable of taking responsibility for your goods. They must be able to ensure that food information, composition, etc., is compliant. And the address you're using must be, and they use the phrase, genuine and substantive enough for anyone writing it to get direct and swift contact with the food business and for any enforcement action that needed to be taken, like serving notices, all that sort of thing, to actually be taken at that address. What it boils down to is that whoever's name and address you put on there, just a registered office address with nothing going on is not enough. A PO box is not enough. Mail forwarding address is not enough. Answering service not enough. So even an accountant, not enough, because they're not capable of actually taking responsibility for your goods and putting something right if it went wrong. Okay. So no, all of your business doesn't have to be located in the EU, but it needs to be a real authorized representative, yeah, rather than just a name and an address.
That's interesting. And again, you know, there's a lot to be taken into consideration there. Michaela, I'm going to come to you just really around sort of the animal side of things, really. Obviously, with just Tony was saying around when the checks are going to come into place and all the rest of it. You know, any sort of words of pearls of wisdom that, you know, sort of food exporters or sort of, you know, the products of animal origin stuff or animal exports generally, is there any sort of pearls of wisdom that you could share with people and just making sure that they're not going to fall foul of any imminent changes?
Yep, certainly. So I think the first point would be to signpost to the upcoming webinars and resources that DEFRA will be producing over the summer, and ensure to look out for them and engage, because they'll provide quite a useful overview for a lot of traders, and there'll be the chance to kind of ask questions directly to kind of policy leads and really kind of get that insight. In terms of real pearls of wisdom, I would say speak to your EU exporter primarily. Make sure, keep that conversation going. Make sure that they understand the certification requirements and that they kind of are prepared to get a health certificate if required and know the actual import rules, because it's very kind of vital in our process that the GB importer and the EU exporter speak to each other, because ultimately they will need to provide you with a health certificate for animal products, and then the GB importer will have to upload an electronic copy of that into IPAFs. So it requires active communication from both parties. So
is it a bit like, can I just interrupt? Sorry, is it a bit like with the customs really, where with the situation with Inco Terms, as to whether or not the terms and conditions of sale transfer responsibility to, so you mentioned about making sure the EU exporter knows what regulations, so can they sort of, under the sort of commercial terms, can they pass that across to the importer and say this is your responsibility?
It depends what you mean, because fundamentally, in terms of health certificates, these are issued by the competent authority in the exporting country. So if you're bringing goods in from France, it would be the competent authority in France that issues a physical certificate to the exporter, so to speak. The liability point, I think, Tony, you mentioned earlier in terms of who pre-notifies, and the different liability arrangements that you were touching on, Graham. Fundamentally, I think it does come down to the Inco Term relationship and agreement. We say that it's the GB importer or a representative acting on their behalf who must pre-notify using IPAFs. But the core point that we kind of communicate is the person responsible for the load in GB should be on that IPAFs notification.
Okay, that's really useful. I think, again, sort of sometimes, I know we've had obviously some easements in place over the last few months, 175 days, I think it is, which is sort of fast coming to an end. And so we are expecting there to be a few little surprises where people thought, well, I thought you'd done this. I thought, no, I thought you'd done that. And so it could be interesting to see how that's going to play out. Tony, you mentioned obviously there's going to be sort of practice period between October. Are there any sort of such easements going to be in place beyond sort of January, or is that, as far as you're aware, that's a sort of deadline?
January is really when everything's supposed to start, Tudor, and obviously things are a movable feast, but no, that from January we're kind of all in the real world. That's the plan at the present. There will be some practice runs, and colleagues at DEFRA have been brilliant at doing that. So there have been kind of practice runs, bringing things through. I mean, it's not my area, but things with plant passports, and there will be kind of practice runs through BCPs. I think the other thing to remember is obviously there's lots of border control posts around already that have been doing this stuff for many, many years. We're in a kind of unique position with the short straits where most of that trade, there's some rest of the world things, but not much. So it is about European kind of freight moving across, and that's the big challenge. But BCPs are, they used to be called BIPs for anybody else, that, you know, the old money, which is border import post sector, but now they're BCPs. So it is well established, that framework. It's just getting one stood up here and dealing with European freight, and obviously the change.
Border control point. Is that right?
Border control post, it stands for. So it's more than a post, luckily. It's a bit bigger than a post. It's a big shed.
Well, we're just around the corner from you, so we know how big that is. It's enormous, isn't it?
It is.
It's definitely a few posts, if not a few sheds, as you say. Okay, what about Northern Ireland? I'm just going to, again, Michaela, from, you know, either from your side or from Tony. Is there any special rules for Northern Ireland here? Because obviously it's not part of the EU, but, you know, but it is. You know,
it's Europe, Tudor. I think that's what I would say from a kind of moving goods. It's Europe at the moment. So even though there has been derogation, that's the deal, isn't it? That once you go across the Irish Sea, get halfway across, you are in Europe. So everything that applies now, and I think that's why there's so much kind of carnage going on. So in essence, everything arriving there will be treated like it would be treated if it's arriving in France at the present time, and that's where there's so much upset about that.
Yes, the sausage wars of Northern Ireland. Graham, you had your hand up there.
Just that the received wisdom for traders dealing with Northern Ireland is that it's free to register. They should make sure they're registered with the Trader Support Service, which has been set up to try facilitating trade with Northern Ireland as much as possible, keep it as a smooth flow. I've heard reports that it's not gone well, but I've also heard very good reports of how helpful they are. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you need to embrace what's available. And Trader Support Service is a free service for a reason, and it's to try and help get people over the RSC hurdle, if you like.
Absolutely. Just while we're in between, so thank you very much indeed. There's been a link that's just been posted into the live chat there. I'm just conscious of time. It's 20 to 2. We've got a hard stop at 2 o'clock today because we have a few people need to be elsewhere. So if you have any questions that you want asked or haven't been answered from an earlier submission, please do make sure that they go into the live chat so we get them across now. That'd be really, really helpful. Okay, I'm just going to go back to some of the earlier questions we submitted. Let's have a quick look here. Okay, does food imported from the EU have to do anything different to comply with UK law? Interestingly, we have discovered there's been a few little areas of divergence. Now, obviously, the whole plan was to try and stay harmonised and synchronised in terms of our regulations, but we've already seen one or two little areas of divergence. As far as you're aware, Michaela, is there anything different at the moment to the way things were to the way they are now, other than obviously having to sort of produce paperwork to evidence stuff?
So you're talking in terms of current controls right now?
Yes.
Or not so much in my area. There are current requirements on live animals, products of animal origin under safeguard measures, germinal products. But the key point for us is the October and January from an animal product perspective. I know customs is a completely other kettle of fish that that I'm sure I probably do not know the most about on this call. But it's really about that October and January dates on our side.
Okay. What can small businesses be doing to prepare now? Obviously, certainly if they're involved in moving food and drink backwards and forwards. I've got a question about wine in a minute, which we'll come to. Tony, what would your recommendation be? How can they sort of do what they can to get ready?
I think it's really, as Michaela is saying, make sure you get onto one of those webinars so you understand. Make sure you realise that there are other bits of the pie. So if it's a controlled good, it will have to come through us in the border inspection post, but also a control post. So I said it again, there, didn't I, BIP instead of BCP.
Yep.
But the other item is about the customs status. So imports and exports, as the experts all here are aware, is very tricky around the customs kind of declarations. When we're all one and free and harmonised, that wasn't an issue because tax had looked after everything. So it's a huge change there, really. So you don't want to end up with too much blue on blue, that we're looking at it from a product animal origin, customs have got a problem, etc., etc. That would be my advice, and seriously think about using cargo agents, etc., to assist you if you're thinking about that. I think the extra cost will probably be very worthwhile. Most people bringing stuff into Gatwick never kind of imported themselves. They would always go through a cargo agent to kind of get through that really tricky maze of what they're supposed to be doing there. So that would be my kind of. But and in terms of changes to food, there are subtle changes, but actually there was an idea that we weren't going to be aligned at one point. We weren't going to follow things around high risk foodstuffs, which alarmed me slightly. But the recent changes around pesticides, etc., we've adopted exactly the same controls around high risk, and that's things such as chili peppers or nuts that have things called aflatoxins. So we have stayed aligned, which is really good, and I hope the UK continues to do that. It wouldn't make any sense not to, because they are a problematic product there. So I think we will go along with the Committee on Food Safety in the EU and change in there. In all honesty, we probably won't get much of that through the short straits, but we certainly might get food product up from Turkey that comes across land and those kind of things. But yeah, but my advice would be to make sure that you get expertise in that pot.
Excellent, Tony. Thank you, Graham.
Yes, Tudor, your question was what should SMEs be doing? We are getting tight for time, but there is still a government pot of money available that can be applied for.
Yep.
Up to £2,000 for advice, assistance and training, and it can be a mix of those things. It doesn't have to be one or the other exclusively. Indeed, the company I was with this morning, I was helping them, and it was completely attributable to that pot of money. That was the reason I was there.
Excellent. I've just posted, it's called the SME Brexit Support Fund. It's administered by PwC. They're the ones that sort of handling the processes. The principles, as Graham quite rightly pointed out there, is to be used for consultancy and advice and training, specifically if you're dealing with the EU. Just a couple of things. You need to put a quote forward in your application. That then gets approved. You then go and get the work done or the training done, produce an invoice to confirm that you've paid the bill, and then they reimburse you the amount that you've been approved. So fairly quick and slick, does work quite well. Again, available to the 30th of June. Might get extended, but I wouldn't take your chances. I'd get your application in early if you haven't done so already. So just Google that, SME Brexit Support Fund. There's a question in here specifically around, this is from Sue, what do organic importers and exporters with regulations from 2022? This is a bit of a labelling thing, so I'm going to come across to you, Nathan, because this is about, organic. Can we still claim to be organic, and vice versa? So importers and exporters, both ways.
Yeah, so I can give some commentary on the trading standards side of things, but after that I would throw it open, especially to Tony and to Graham, to see if they've got any comments as well. It was a tricky situation moving into transition, because it looked like we weren't able to sell any organic food in the EU. But at the last moment, the EU relented and said that they will recognise GB organic food until 31st of December 2021. That has now been extended to 31st of December 2023. So all food and feed that is certified as organic in GB, they'll just be accepted as organic in the EU until the 31st of December 2023. Okay, so that's for exports. You will need to make minor labelling changes to your product, and that should be from now. So any goods, any organic goods going out into the EU from now will need a statement of agricultural origin. So basically an amended statement about where it comes from or where it was grown, etc. And it will need a control body code on it, your organic control body. Most of those won't have changed, but if there are any changes that come about from getting GB certification, then that will need to be updated on your packaging. I'll drop down some guidance which has been issued in the chat for Sue to refer to. But from an export point of view, and again, this is from trading standards, not necessarily customs. No changes need to be made to your product until the 1st of January 2022. After that, each organic load that is going out to Europe is going to need a certificate of inspection, a COI. And now, unfortunately, they haven't got a digital system in place yet, although they've got, 6 months, so it might happen. But at the moment, it's all a manual paper system. They don't just give out the forms. You need to contact your organic control body, so it's the Soil Association, etc., and they will provide you with the forms as and when you need them. You need to fill out the form, submit it to your organic control body, and go from there. It's not trading standards that deals with the certificate of inspection, so I don't have a huge amount of knowledge on it, I'm afraid, but I know the system is in place. Although what they have clarified is that will be the case for goods moving to the EU, but you won't need a certificate of inspection for goods moving to Northern Ireland. So that's it from the trading standards point of view, other than dropping in that link. But if any of the other panel members would like to comment, I'd welcome it.
Yeah, so you won't need it for the EU, but you will need it to Northern Ireland. Or won't need it to Northern Ireland.
No,
yeah, other way around. That's strange, given that, we just, okay. We'll see. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for you, Sue. It sounds like you've got an extension to the end of 2022, but then, after that, I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like. So, if you have some more follow-up questions, please do pop them in the chat there. Tony, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nathan's absolutely back on there. So the COI, as they call it, the Certificate of Origin, that is something we check when it arrives at the border control post. The good news is, even though we don't have an electronic system, the system in place in Europe, which is Traces NT, which just stands for Traces New Technology, that they are using COIs on that system. So they've switched off the older system. So if you're importing, then it will come through into our system, if that makes sense, and we'll check that you've got a COI. That will be on the IPAF system. But if you're going across, you would probably have to upload your documents into an electronic system going the other way, and it should be easier, hopefully. The organic kind of control system here is quite old, and there wasn't an electronic version. Basically, we'll get a bit of paper, we'll stamp it up, make sure it's approved, and then it will go on elsewhere. But Europe have developed their own kind of system, and we should have our own system on IPAFs if everything plays out where they're planning to go. So that was all I was going to add there, really.
No, that's really useful. That's great. Michaela, got anything to add? I know it's strictly speaking your area of expertise, and the media is normally doing plants. Anything to add to that at all in terms of organics?
Not much, I'm afraid, though my team does speak to the organics team quite a bit. So I'm happy to take that away and provide some answer in writing.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, excellent, good. Any more questions? Please do pop them in the chat. We are now at 10 to 2, so we're going to do 5 more minutes and then we'll start to do the wrap on this. Okay, just going to check. There's a couple more questions here which we had in wine. Yes. Now Kent is fast becoming the new vineyard for the UK. We're seeing wine in and out. Nathan, I'm going to just stick this one in your court first, because this is quite a complex subject, I know, but how complex is it and what should they do? So how will importers of wine from the EU for sale in the UK be affected if this is going to go horribly wrong for us all now?
If first off, I would say, as you pointed out, it is quite complicated, and it's not one I specifically want to advise on in this. I would recommend the trader contacts us directly, and we can learn all about his product and exactly what his question is, and then get back to him on that. There are multiple pieces of legislation covering wine. If it's just a labeling question, that might be relatively simple, but there are a huge numbers around it. So like, where is your vineyard? What can you call it? Where does it have to be grown? All that sort of thing, getting things registered. Wine as a subject is extremely complicated. So come to us and ask about that. But I had a quick look at this beforehand, and I did drop some links into the chat, which is the FSA guidance that is currently available. And the third link in that wine is something the FSA put out specifically dealing with labelling changes and etc. on imported and exported wine. So some of the questions hopefully be answered just by following that link, and it's all in black and white.
Graham, do you know anything about the customs and side of things, really? Because I know there's duty on all sorts of alcohol.
Well, I suppose the main thing to say is that there's going to be an increased cost in terms of duty where wine's concerned, because previously it was moving freely between the European countries and the UK. I can't claim to be an expert on alcohol, although I do imbibe from time to time. I am actually just starting to do some work with a wine importer. So I'm probably going to learn a heck of a lot myself over the next little while. The comment I was going to make a comment on the back end of the organic question that came in from Sue, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think it applies to wine and probably a lot of other things as well. And it was just without wishing to state the obvious, but sometimes the obvious is what does need stating. The importance of staying in touch with your industry association, your network, your information source, if you like. Where the organic question was concerned, I immediately thought of the Soil Association, and there will be organisations, not just the Soil Association, but one or two others as well, that are beavering away, getting information together to assist their members. And indeed, the same is probably going to be applying to the wine industry. I did also speak recently to a tea importer and the filtered drinks industry. There was an association for drinks that are filtered and diluted with hot water and all sorts of stuff. There's an association for pretty much everything, and I just think it's a time to stay in touch with the industry bodies.
Absolutely. I think we have a little bit more of an opportunity than we did perhaps with the EU transition, which obviously commenced beginning of this year, because the deal hadn't been done until Christmas Eve. So a lot of the legislation couldn't be drafted, and guidance and instruction couldn't be issued. Whereas now, at least we have a bit of an opportunity for many SMEs and businesses to engage in conversations to try and get the facts established before we sort of wait for that deadline to come and go. And then be found wanting. So really encourage people, if you haven't done so, to give us a call, 0333 602 300, or to use any one of the links that have been published into the chat here. Okay, I'm just going to sort of start to wrap this up now. So I'm just going to do a quick round table there. We come to you, Michaela, first. Again, just maybe some top tips or parting suggestions to SMEs, and then we'll go Tony, Graham, and Nathan, and then we'll wrap things up. So, Michaela.
Well, so top tip, just to reiterate, is check out the gov.uk guidance. Remember the dates of October for health certificate and pre-notification, January for entry via an established point of entry with an authorised BCP. Look out for webinars coming from DEFRA, and speak to your EU exporters.
The webinars have been great, so yeah, really recommend those. So thank you very much indeed. And if you haven't done so already, guests, pop along to the DEFRA site. There's a nice contact us page where it breaks down all the different departments and who you need to be speaking to or on what particular topic. So wade into that and have a good look around. Tony, what about yourself? Obviously you're revving up, ready to get busy up there.
Yeah, I think the things really along the same term. Make sure you check the guidance, but please don't be frightened to talk to us, because that's a really genuine offer. We are there to help you. We're not completely in action at the moment because the thing isn't built. So now is the time to kind of work together, but we do want to work together. And I'm very keen to have some kind of partnership kind of with people using the facility in the trade, because that's the whole point. It's there for you. Our whole role isn't to stop your goods coming in. Completely the opposite is to help your goods coming in. And we will have naughty people, but we won't have many of those. So please talk to us, and that's a genuine offer to help you. We really wouldn't want to be catching people. We want to help and coach you.
Thank you so much indeed. That's great, Tony. Graham, any last words from you, sir?
Yeah, I think I've probably given out my top tip, which is the government grant. Smart money is that don't rely on it being extended, but the smart money is that it may be, because according to the Institute of Export, a large slug of it still hasn't been taken up. Just really developing the wine comments a little bit further. The service that we provide is very much about some of the logistical things, like helping you apply for authorised warehouse status with customs, that sort of thing. Indeed, I'm working a completely different subject, but I'm working with someone at the moment who's going through IPR status application.
IPR standing for?
Which, yeah, sorry, yeah, I was just going to explain, which is inward processing relief of duty for goods that come in for a process and then go out again, so there can be a suspension of duty. And there are a lot of these sort of duty suspension situations, which you know, I think to some extent we're all being reminded of, we're all learning about in some cases. And sometimes it's just the application and the process that's actually quite daunting. And so, yeah, we're there to help. We don't always know all the answers, but sometimes it's about going into bat. And you know, after you've got your first 20 runs, the runs start flowing a bit more freely then.
Very true, very true. Thank you for that. And talking of overs, over to Nathan.
My top tip would be, if you are trading with a European country, stop thinking that you're trading with the EU and start thinking that you are trading with that country. Don't take it for granted because your goods comply in the UK or elsewhere in Europe that they will comply in that country. So for example, if you send beer to France, there's a legal requirement that it has to be labeled up with a warning not to drink when you're pregnant. That sort of little thing that you wouldn't necessarily know about. I've dropped a link into the notes for product contact points. You can go there and it's a full link of contact details for regulators in each country, and you can go there and get advice on that particular country.
Fabulous. Thank you all very much indeed, our panelists here this afternoon. As ever, we're blessed that we have such talent and expertise amongst us and so readily accessible. They really are here to help. So you know, those of you on the call, please do reach out. Don't sort of sit in ignorance and wait for things to happen around you. You know, there is a responsibility on your part to sort of get out there and find out what's going on. It's being provided. It's just got to be tracked down, read, digested, and applied. So thank you very much indeed. Just a reminder, this whole Q&A will be made available on the Trading Standards site in due course once it's gone through a bit of editing. But for now, let me thank once again Nathan, Graham, Tony, and of course Michaela. Thank you all very much indeed for your contributions. Thank you, audience, for attending. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.